Give me the pumpkin porter. I'm ready to hit the start button, just like our guy Craig Morgan hit the start button yesterday. Go PHNX.com. 10 burning questions ahead of training camp. Now, full transparency, I have this. I want everybody to check it out, but I do think it's funny. Craig got this article out yesterday, and then I saw a lot of questions pertaining to the Cardinals from other outlets today. So I want to give Craig a shout out because it was the first place that I was able to find with these questions laid out. It was my training camp primer, and I appreciate that, Craig.
Well, I don't want this to turn into a love fest, but you guys played a major hand in this. Legit, do not know where I would have been on this story without your help. Bo was helping me while he was driving to San Diego to go on vacation. Then I bugged you. I don't even remember when I bugged you on the weekend, but you were there for me. So it's much appreciated. And I think about this. You talk about getting sick of summer. You guys got to be sick about talking off season. Like talking about snubs, talking about all the stuff that you've had to talk about all this time. It's finally time to talk about what's happening on the field.
I agree with that. Like Johnny was kind of outlining the unofficial start to fall, which I think is when pumpkin spice lattes hit the scene. When Craig Morgan, now you can just set it, whenever he has his 10 burning questions drop, that's going to be the unofficial start to training camp.
I like that. Let's make it a yearly thing.
But as far as look, I'll never get sick of talking off season because off season you can talk about you can go any direction with it.
It's true.
You don't actually have results that you have to say, well, they lost and we got to pick up the pieces. Here it's just like this ranking stinks and let me tell you about it. So selfishly, I kind of like the offseason.
I like draft stuff, but not this part of it. This part of it, I'm so sick and tired of. The draft, though, that could last forever. I'd be happy.
All right.
It almost did this year. The draft season, tongue in cheek, it nearly killed us in preparing for holding the line for one MHJ. Like that could have taken a really dark turn. Usually it doesn't end that well for your boys. But here's what I will say, Craig. This year, it's much easier to talk about this team, and it's outlined in your burning questions compared to this time last year. We were hopeful, but we knew what we were signing up for. Like your first burning question for anybody who hasn't seen it, Kyler Murray's health. Can he quiet the doubters from a health perspective? Because if you check that box, as I made an argument in the first segment, Craig, a lot of good things are going to happen for the Cardinals if Kyler Murray stays healthy.
Yeah. And that's true of any NFL team, right? But not a lot of NFL teams have a guy who you can believe, okay, if he's healthy and he's playing like we know he can play, we got a chance. There's still only a dozen of those guys in the NFL. This is such a difficult position. I'm going to dive into this more as we go through camp. But yes, question number one, the overriding question, the thing that will define this entire season, we all know it. It's Kyler Murray.
Yeah, and it's huge. And the last time you actually were covering this team, they had one of those guys, Carson Palmer. And I remember Carson Palmer at that time was kind of on a bit of a pitch count. They had outlined how he's going to look throughout training camp and preseason. There's none of that going on with Kyler, as we'll ask Gannon, if there is kind of a schedule for Kyler. I know we had one with Colt McCoy last year, but very different circumstances as he was coming off of a unknown arm procedure that never kind of rebounded. But be interesting to see how they kind of incorporate Kyler this entire training camp.
How much do you guys believe in just the vibe thing? We've talked about it. We heard from Kyler Murray and it just felt different. How much do you buy into that just the feeling around this team is different so it could lead to better results?
I mean, I'll put my homer hat on and say a lot because I watched Kyler Murray be an MVP candidate for 9 weeks, and we found out later he and his coach did not have a strong relationship, and the offense was figured out quickly by the NFL. And again, it sounds like I'm putting everything on Cliff Kingsbury. I'm not. But can you imagine, you're a talented individual and you're kind of fledgling around an organization, a company, and then they have new ownership come in and they have a structure that elevates you instead of trying to bring you down. And you feel like the entire time, hey guys, I got you to the postseason, right? I'm trying to make you viable. I was the number one pick. I was a top 10 pick in 2 pro sports, and I was a Heisman winner in Oklahoma. And so now I just feel like, and I said this, I don't know if it was Damon or somebody recently, I feel like Kyler Murray, this is his team in large part because there's youth on this team and people look to him for leadership. And I feel like too many times, I think I said this to you, Bo, right before you took off, too many times with the Arizona Cardinals, Steve Keim would come in, maybe with Michael Bidwell, with Cliff Kingsbury, and say like, hey, you know what? I'm not seeing what I want from K1. Let's get JJ Watt in here. Let's get Rodney Hudson. Let's get AJ Green. Let's get all these veterans in here to just kind of lead for us. And I also just feel like Kyler Murray, he's had these leading intangibles before. I think he's just been empowered now by this organization.
Right. Well, and the decision makers, the powers that were in place before, like they knew the importance of Kyler Murray, but clearly not enough to really put him in a position to be successful, truly be successful, give him the tools to go through the maturation process that, young players like Kyler Murray go through. Like they take their lumps. I feel like it came to a head in year 4 where, they had just been relying a whole lot on his skill set and didn't give him an opportunity to truly develop, especially from that leadership standpoint. And now we're starting to see that. Like when you do put the right people around him and give him the right tools. I mean, I'm watching the flight plan today that released last week, and Tajon Palmer, when we talked to him in studio, Johnny, he mentioned this little, parting words in the huddle from Kyler Murray. And he's saying, hey, like, I'm sick and tired of losing. I want to win now. I want to win a Super Bowl. Now, some people might, scoff at that, roll their eyes at that, but that I love seeing that from Kyler Murray, because I don't know if we would have seen that 2 years ago.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that I've gained for all the time that I've been covering sports is a BS detector. Like you hear this hype all the time. Every preseason with teams, it's, oh, we're hopeful. We think we can be a playoff team. You learn to hear through that. You learn to read when it's real and when it's just this. And it just felt so different when Kyler Murray was talking. And you talk about the coaching situation. That's one thing. The GM as well. I covered Steve Keim while he was the GM here, but it does feel like he's also come of age. He's at the right age now to assume control of this team, to be the guy, to be the leader, not to have to look to any of those other guys anymore.
Yeah, and I just feel like this isn't talked about enough. Like there was a resentment with Keim and Cliff to Kyler Murray. Like I think they resented the success that he had, and it's their own quarterback, and he got paid. Right. And even like with a little bit with Michael Bidwell, it's just like it never felt like they fully embraced him.
Right. Could have kept Rosen. I mean,
like he literally saved Steve Keim's job. He got Cliff Kingsbury extended and got generational wealth that he can live off of for the rest of his life, that he's going to continue to be paid out for. And for whatever reason, those guys couldn't stand each other. And then you got new people that have come in, and I'll sing this till the cows come home, probably had Michael Bidwell's blessing, had every opportunity to say, go get somebody else. Go get somebody else. There's fucking 5 quarterbacks in the top 10 this year. Go pick which one you want. And they said, no, we're okay. We're going to roll with this guy. No one talks about that nationally. And it blows my mind when we're hyping up JJ McCarthy and Jaden Daniels over Kyler Murray. And it's just like these guys with options, Monty Osborne and Jonathan Gannon, have cachet and they have options. And they told everybody, we're good. We're going to double and triple down on this guy. That was their out clause, was this draft this year. And they said, shove it. We're going to take a receiver. We're going to elevate him. That should tell everybody, like, we're set at the position, health permitting.
Yeah. And speaking of that wide receiver, I look at this list. Number 6 is Marvin Harrison Jr., the next great Cardinals receiver. We'll get back to some that I skipped over, but I went down to 6. This is my belief, guys, as we sit here on the eve of players reporting. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to hijack training camp. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the talk of training camp. I think he's going to be undeniable as far as what Cardinals fans, what they want to hear about, what they're going to hear about, because what he could potentially put on display starting this week.
And they're going to get to see him, right?
Yeah,
you get to
starting.
See,
yes,
when just the simple optics of watching this guy on the field. Once you're standing there and realizing, good God, how are we the same species? Because his athleticism and his speed and his height, it's just an absurd combination. And now they're going to get a first-hand look at it, close-up look at it.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I want a freak show. I want all the highlights on social media. I want everybody to be buzzing because, again, like, this guy's all about football. This guy isn't about his image, his ego. You saw it in that Hard Knocks clip. This is his time to shine. The offseason, he sat it out. He focused on training to be able to have a camp. And again, like, this is a knock on the cornerbacks for the Arizona Cardinals. They don't have prime Patrick Peterson to line up against Marvin Harrison Jr., albeit as a rookie. Like, so he's going to have an opportunity to go up against some guys that we're excited about, But at the same time, like they don't have a ceiling of, in my opinion, MHJ. So I think, Bo, to your point, that lends itself to big explosive plays. Like Cardinal fans especially deserve that. And God bless the fans that came out last year and watched Colt McCoy point every other possession because he couldn't throw the football. And we were fired up about Michael Wilson, but there wasn't a ton to fill the stadium with.
Right.
Now it's like, hey, training camp is free. Red and white scrimmage is free. Come out and watch this guy because you're going to be hopefully watching him for the next 10 years.
Right. I actually had to go to family members and I said, hey, red-white scrimmage, it's still free. Last time I told them to come out was 2022 Camp Country Club there.
Oh, God.
And it was the worst. You and I were there, Johnny. It was the worst. Like nothing happened. People just sat around and just twiddled their thumbs for 2 hours. It was just brutal. I'm like, no, you should come out. Like this is going to be fun. This is a competitive team. You're going to see some freaks on display. And Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, we talked to Kaiser White, who's a veteran linebacker, been in this league for a while now. And we're talking about who you like to match up with or who you like to see match up with. And he can't stop from saying Marvin Harrison Jr.
And I mean, get you fired up. I have no concerns about the offense in all actuality. Like I do have some concerns, Craig, and we talked about it off air about the pass rush. And I want to bring this up because I think it's notable. So Damon's second love, the Miami Dolphins, they lost an edge rusher to retirement over the weekend in Shaq Barrett. So they are doing what Bo and I believe the Cardinals need to do, and they're hosting a bunch of veterans today. Yannick Ngakoue and Agba and a bunch of guys. Yet you outlined in your burning questions, like despite the lack of edge pressure, especially at the end of last year, they are doubling down on Zaven Collins and B.J. Ojulari. I think that is outside of K1's health, that could define the season for this team, their decision to do that.
Why do you get the sense that they are doing that? Why wasn't this addressed? Could it still be addressed?
I hope so. I think Mike McDaniels is an offensive coach and they need bodies. Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rawls probably take immense pride in being able to say we can generate it with the additions we've made elsewhere. I don't know that, but I feel like they think they love Zaven Collins to death, even though he may never account more than a rotational guy. And then B.J. Ojulari was their handpicked guy. So they probably think we don't have an excuse to bring in a Yannick Ngakoue. We got to make it work with these guys. But I see Bo's like tilting his head. Is that might be a stubborn mindset that gets killed early in the season.
I mean, we talked about the quarterback position and the lack of movement to kind of be the bridge to Kyler Murray is probably the main mistake that they made last offseason and going into the regular season without Kyler Murray for those 10 games. Is the lack of movement at pass rush going to be kind of the glaring mistake that they made? It has big time potential. Like I see why they would probably have some confidence that Zaven Collins and B.J. Ojulari and they like Dennis Gardeck can step up. But at the same time, like, is that a bit arrogant to think that you can turn these guys in and get enough production? But also keep in mind, like, there is proof there that they were able to take kind of this no-name pass rush group through 11 weeks last season, and it was top 12. Like, as far as sacks and TFLs, like, they were very productive out of nowhere, but then that production fell off a cliff. Can they get the consistent pressure enough to kind of sustain through the long haul of a 17-game season? Like, hopefully that's not something that they look back on and say, hey, maybe one guy could have been the difference. Maybe throwing the bag at a Danielle Hunter or being in the conversations with a Jonathan Grenard coming from the Texans inside of the big deal with the Vikings, maybe we should have been more in those negotiations.
Well, and you wonder too, like when you look at that first segment of games when they were generating a pass rush or at least getting sacks, right? What changed? You guys watched the team last season. What changed there? Aside from you probably don't want to rely on Dennis Gardeck to lead your team in sacks. That's not.
But
where
he was very
go.
productive.
He was.
I
don't want to throw any shade at him. He had 6 sacks, but that's not your guy. So what changed over those last several games where they couldn't generate anything?
I think there's a combination of things. I think you began to see the deterioration of the little defensive tackle depth that they had. And I'm sure they would tell you now we've fortified that with 3 to 4 guys. LJ Collier, Darius Robinson, now Dante Stills, Bilal Nichols, and then, of course, Justin Jones. They got like 5 to 6 guys in rotation that can help the edge rushers. I also think losing Kazir White, their field general, the guy who calls their defense, probably made a difference. But I don't know. Part of it
level, man. I think you're right with Kazir. Like Kazir went out, but they didn't have really any ability, their margin to lose anybody on the defensive line, and they were just crushed by injury. Like Jonathan Ledbetter in and out of the lineup, LJ Collier and Carlos Watkins were already lost for the year, and they're not world beaters at the position, but they had played NFL snaps in their career. By like late in the season, you had guys that were playing NFL or significant snaps that had no business doing it, and they got rid of Marco Wilson, which was it was addition by subtraction. But at the same time, you were starting how many rookies in your secondary, and opposing offenses were probably just licking their chops.
It's impossible to judge. And again, like I give them immense credit for gutting out wins in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Like this defense was the worst collection of personnel in the NFL last year. Like we joke, that was by a steep margin. And so I will continue to give them the benefit of the doubt until they show me otherwise. Now, Craig and Bo, if they're getting smoked by a shit Seattle team late in the year or by, Drake May in New England, then I'm going to be critical of Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis. But I feel like the defense, people aren't giving them an out right now, but they understand like the first 6 to 8 games, the offense has to carry this team.
Yeah, and you certainly can't. I mean, I want to make that clear, and I wrote this about Nick Rallis. You can't lay this on him. What happened in that first season with all the things that you're talking about, aside from the fact that the guy was hired at age 29. I can't even imagine that. And this is his first coordinator job, right?
Yeah.
The personnel just wasn't there. And you knew this was going to turn over significantly with a new staff, with a new GM. So again, you can't lay it at his feet, but how much more of a free pass do you get? Maybe, as you said, through those first several games, because the opponents are so tough, it feels like expectations need to ramp up quite a bit for this defense.
Somebody was like, "Hey, Nick, this chicken salad tastes like shit." Like, yeah, it's made out of chicken shit. That's what you gave me here.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, you and I talked off air, and we talked about Budda Baker, and I feel like Budda Baker can really help himself if he finds a way to keep this unit together and overachieving to start this year. And again, that's probably not fair, but I will say, and I was quoted in Craig's article, like I feel this way. Like I feel like this is Budda's last year, barring something unforeseen. He would have to play at an all-worldly level. So I'll pose the same question that Craig posed to me, to my co-host, Bo Brock. Like what's the future of Budda Baker with this team?
Yeah, and that's what, as you mentioned, one of the burning questions. It's really going to be tough, even if he does do something that traditionally he hasn't done and take the ball away. If he puts up big takeaway statistics and is kind of the big time player that he's been in this defense since he was drafted at Washington, it's still out of the character of this organization to give him a lucrative extension. The one thing that stood out to me in that flight plan, and that has stood out throughout since he's been drafted, is Rabbit Taylor Demerson shows some leadership qualities right out of the gate. If he can show it on the field, and our guy Baldy Baldinger was big on him coming out of Texas Tech. Like, is he an in-house successor? Is he the kind of the backup plan, or the contingent plan to Budda Baker? Then we've seen the Broncos move on from Justin Simmons, who's put up crazy statistics at that position, and they just cut him, and he still hasn't found a job. And I know there's all this respect paid to Budda Baker throughout the league, and including the Cardinals especially, but I just don't know. It's such a kind of an enigma right now as far as what they'll do.
Well, you want to get out before you need to get out, right? And as you approach that key age of 30, which we've seen the stats are undeniable. Right. I'm not saying it impacts every player the same way, but the overwhelming stats say you're going to see a decline in play. So do you hang on too long, or do you make the move ahead of time with good insurance policies in place?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but this time last year, they needed to find a way to give Budda more money and to extend him and to make watching the Cardinals viable in 2023. Because they did not have bankable stars. They didn't have Kyler Murray to start the year. And again, it should be about winning games. I mean, fast forward to the end of this year, you're going to have, hopefully, a solidified franchise quarterback. You're going to have a generational wide receiver, a Pro Bowl caliber tight end. You got a bunch of rookies on the defensive side that people were fired up about. Like, I'm not going to say that this team, especially if he balls out, that they're ready to move on from the leadership of Budda Baker, but they are going to be exponentially better positioned to do so. And again, there was an argument to be made last year. Help us set the culture. And I hope he and James Conner get to see that through with a postseason berth this year. They deserve that. They're great pros, consummate professionals for this team. But we're gonna know if it feels like the right time in January. And again, like I'm looking forward to watching him play. I hope he's healthy. But like, if you're asking me right now, like, what's the likelihood that they give him some lofty? I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, he came off a season where he had no pass deflections, no turnovers. And this is a defense, their prime goal is to take the ball away. And I mean, you can play, if you play a role in this defense, great. But if you're wanting to get paid by this regime, I just don't, that it doesn't add up. And that's unfortunate, but at the same time, that thing is the business of the NFL.
Yeah, that's the league without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's always hard moving away from franchise legends. I mean, just the Cardinals.
Adrian Wilson, before the awful allegations this offseason, when he was a top player in this organization, the team had to cut him, right? I mean, then the same thing happened to Darnell Dockett. Like this organization, even when you didn't have a whole lot of trust in the decision makers, were making some tough decisions even before that.
I mean, we didn't have a lot of trust in Darnell Dockett's decision making either.
Right,
videotaping himself in showers and things like that.
Back in the old U-Street
he was
days.
a lot of fun to cover up.
Or Periscope, right? Was it Periscope days?
Yes.
That has hopefully been scrubbed from the internet. Thank you. Such a great article. I encourage everybody to go check it out. Anything, Craig, that you want to highlight specifically, because there's so many embedded nuggets in the article, and then we're going to see everybody on display this week. But, I'll pose this to both you guys. And we've got a graphic to support it. Like, who do you feel like is under the most pressure to perform this training camp for the Arizona Cardinals? Bo, I'll start with you.
Are we taking a look at the graphic, or you want my answer first?
I want your answer first, then we can look at the graphic.
I think there's a ton of pressure under a second-year pass rusher in B.J. Ojulari to kind of lead that group. And, considering where he was at this time last year, and he's just getting back from, a leg injury. And when we saw him as the preseason finale, he looked behind, and he really didn't start to show up until a couple weeks in the regular season. To put that type of pressure on him to take this group to where they need to be in order to contend, I think that's huge. But at the same time, he's under contract for the next couple seass. So
how about Zaven Collins?
Yeah, Zaven Collins, absolutely.
He's not under contract.
Yeah, no safety net of a fifth-year option. Probably. I think that's a good point. Probably Zaven, his position mate there.
That's my guy. I think you talked me into that, by the way, Johnny. So I think that's the guy I'd have to cite. He's playing for money, too. He's playing for his future at this point.
Yeah.
And he hasn't done enough to secure it at this point.
Is he also, like, kind of in a weird way, like, playing for his career? Like, if he goes out in the free agency market and people are like, hey, what's your position? Like, what do we do with you?
Right.
And that's not a place you want to be in. And you guys are both right. Here are our top roughly 4 to 5 players have the most pressure this training camp. And it's Zaven Collins. And again, I would include B.J. Ojulari. How about Greg Dortch? Greg Dortch now with the spot solidified, yet he's got Zay Jones on his heel. Like, he's in a contract.
Like he's waving his finger at you like, hey, how dare you?
I know. And I love Greg Dortch, and I think he responds to pressure, unlike a Rondell Moore, but I think there's pressure nonetheless. How about Clayton Tune? It's like, is he going to be active on the roster? Is he going to be a practice squad guy? Could he be inexplicably cut if Desmond Ridder looks good? Like, there's nothing guaranteed to him. And speaking of nothing guaranteed, like we mentioned, the cornerback group that's going to go up against Marv, the influx of athleticism, youth, Sean Murphy-Bunty, Max Melton. What does the future roster spot look like for guys like Keitrell Clark and Starling Thomas, who good soldiers last year, gentlemen, got you through the season, but they have upgraded considerably at that position?
Yeah, they flooded it, right? And that was the best way they could approach, filling some of the needs at the cornerback position opposite Sean Murphy-Bunting after they secured him during the tampering period. It really is a great question. And like Max Melton, I think you can make the case for him having some pressure on his shoulders right out of the gates to outperform these guys that were thrust into starting positions last year, like Clark, and how will Starling and Clark deal with potentially being demoted and not seeing nearly as many snaps as they did in their rookie season. So yeah, I completely agree with that. But if there is, I guess if they're team first guys like Gannon likes to outline as far as he wants his entire roster to be filled with, then, they'll accept their role and hopefully try to make their best case. But at the end of the day, accept it. You'll appreciate that, and the team will have depth. But yeah, I mean, could they be on the chopping block? Absolutely. I could see either one of those guys, not receiving a spot on this roster going in to the regular season.
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers there.
Yep.
Johnny, you asked me if there's anything else I wanted to highlight. The only other thing I wanted to talk about was Paris Johnson Jr.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping he excels because I want the opportunity just to talk to Paris Johnson every week because he's unbelievable. He's an incredible quote. I've told you guys before, beat writers are pretty simple people. We just want good stories and good quotes. Paris Johnson's a good quote. And if you look at the history of this position in the Cardinals franchise, and obviously his predecessor was pretty good, but if you're looking for truly elite left tackles, you might have to go all the way back to Louis Sharp. So this has been as much of a black hole maybe as the tight end position for this franchise. I would love to see Paris step up and get it done.
Yeah, you just keep drafting Ohio State players. Like, I'm not an Ohio State fan or fanatic, but like they've just simplified it. We're like, hey, these people and players check all the boxes for it. Like you are around Paris for 5 minutes if you're a fan, if you're a media member, and you understand like this dude is super high level. Marvin, the same thing, and it's like that's what this franchise has been missing. They have been, yes, the impact players on the field. You want grinders on Sunday mornings, but these guys are grinders Monday through Saturday. Like Paris Johnson Jr., we joke about it, Craig. It feels like he lives at the facility. Every time the Cardinals put something out, there's just Paris like off to the side. And that for the longest time, you couldn't get the Cardinals and their players to show up in the offseason for anything. Yeah.
And his want to be an Arizona Cardinal and be part of the kind of ushering in a new era of in caliber of player, what he wants to do and how he wants to endear himself to the community. But we saw it, in the flight plan when he was drafted, and he's in the, limousine coming in from draft night and just saying, this is where I always wanted to be. And that we didn't see that, often enough with this organization, that this guy wants to be a part of the solution. And he's certainly in year two already kind of walking that walk.
And knows the position he's going to play ahead of time, unlike last year where he's like, am I going to be a guard? Am I going to be a right tackle? What am I going to be doing? He's had apparently more time than we knew to prepare to be the starting left tackle this season.
Yep. It's the future is now at that position. I think it was a little bit of an accelerated timeline. And it's unfortunate, as you mentioned, with DJ Humphries suffering the injury when he did, and that business decision that had to be made. But I think this is the right move to just tab Paris Johnson Jr. now and move forward and get him comfortable where he was most comfortable in college. And I think that's what people are sleeping on. Like he had to kind of like, not everybody's ambidextrous, right? And that's what playing the right side versus the left side is. It's like playing in the mirror, right? And I think Paris Johnson Jr., that was more of a challenge going to right tackle last year than it is for him to go back to left tackle this year.
Yeah, we're fired up. Check out his article, 10 Burning Questions, as the Arizona Cardinals open up camp. If you're not following him on Twitter yet, what are you doing? Craig S. Morgan. Yes, how dare you all? And we're fired up.
Something else coming up too, right? Something soon?
Yeah, we got we're going to have, as I mentioned in the newsletter that is going out at some point today, we're going to have written content, at least one piece of written content every day of camp. Oftentimes we're going to have more than 2 pieces of content, but the next one coming out is a look at the best position battles in camp. And you guys obviously helped me with that one a lot too.
Can you guys tease any of the fun stuff you guys will be doing on the road this year? Are we allowed to talk about that, or is that kind of under the rug right now?
I don't think anything is like solidified there. So we would be just talking way out of our behinds.
Above our pay grade. Well, absolutely.
I mean, Miami. We're all doing Miami.
Absolutely. We're covering every spectrum of the Arizona Cardinals this season, and we've leveled up big with Craig Morgan. Craig, thank you so much for joining us, my guy.
All right, guys. I'll see you soon.